And we are on time this evening. Welcome to another episode of Motor City Metrics here at TigersMLReport.com. I'm Earl Hilly. Alongside me is Uper. And you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartMedia, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And of course, you can find us every time we post on TigersMLReport.com. Speaking of that, by the way, we are going to be dropping Tigers Player of the Year article tomorrow. Been finishing up the finishing touches on that. Was getting some input from a couple of people. So Chris and I, we voted. So the voting came down to essentially for minor league player of the year. We got Chris. We had Jerry from our staff. We also had Colin, our intern for the fall. And then we had Scott Bentley from Locked on Tigers and Brandon Day of Bless You Boys. And of course, Jerry, as we did the MVP style. So 3 points for first place and what have you. So that will be unrevealed tomorrow. So and our guest tonight is a friend of the show. I'm a big fan of his work, and he works alongside a couple of people we're familiar with, like Reese White, Trevor Huth, and the gentleman who by the name of is it Adam Lee, or how do you say his
Aram Layton,
who did a really good job interviewing Jackson Jobe, and him and I have been missing touch points to talk about Tigers farm system. Clay Snowden is with us. Snowden, you can find him on Twitter and at let's see here, like I'm disorganized a little bit here.
It's on the screen right there.
Oh yeah, okay, duh. You can find all his stuff at justbaseball.com, and he does a fantasy podcast too as well. So, Clay, good to see you, man. How you been?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, Aram has done an interview with Jobe, and I believe one with Cole Keith recently as well. And I know that Jack McMullen of JustBaseball.com, he's also the Indianapolis Indians play-by-play. He talked to Justin Henry Malloy recently. I think that's been posted. I don't remember if it's been posted or if I was just talking to him about it and it's going to be posted. So nice. Some Tigers love over at Just Baseball.
Yeah, and it's a different kind of interview than what we've done. We've talked to Justin Henry Malloy, we talked to Keith, and the only person we have not talked to is Jackson Jobe, which I think would be fascinating because yesterday was quote unquote the debut of his cutter. Although I didn't understand that because I thought his cutter has been around the entire time. So I was kind of confused by that because I was sitting there going, Chris pointed out to me, we're looking at the stats on Baseball Savant. I'm just like, he's been throwing the cutter since it's began. So I don't know what was going on there, but
I thought the exact same thing when I saw. I don't remember where I saw that tweet. Maybe they were just talking about Arizona. Like I don't know what they were talking about, but correct me if I'm wrong. You all will know much more than me. He brought that out kind of. Not in his first start, or was it in his first start?
In Erie, that was debatable because I thought he was throwing a cutter, but when I was talking to some of the people on staff, they're like, "Oh, it's something in the works of a cutter," but there wasn't really any concrete data that was suggesting that outside of the fact that he was, because basically what I saw on left-handers, they look like a cutter, but.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of thought I was hearing that they got more spin or something. And that was the difference. That he's done something to produce that.
So Clay, I just wanted to ask. This is so. Speaking of Jackson Jobe, this kind of leads into one of the questions I want to ask you. First and foremost, I do like your outlook. We'll talk about your offseason outlook for the 23-24 free agency here in a second. But I did find it funny that all of a sudden now people are on the Jackson Jobe train.
Yeah.
And it's laughable because here we are, and you know this better than anybody else, that just over 6 months ago, not even 6 months ago.
Probably less.
Yeah, probably less than that. Everybody was on Marcelo Meyer, and Jackson Jobe's a bust.
Yeah.
So I got to ask you.
You don't even have to go back that far.
Yeah.
I remember seeing stuff during this year's draft. Oh, a high schooler. What happened with the last one that we took? You know, Jobe's injured. He's this, he's that. And you mentioned Aram Layton of Just Baseball, who's a prospect guy. He interviews a ton of prospects. He has a lot of friends. He grew up in South Florida playing with a lot of these guys from that area. And he talks to them constantly. And he's been texting me all the time about Jobe and how impressed he is. And he's saying that he's one of, if not the best, pitching prospects in all of baseball. And I think people are just a little bit sour. You know, your top draft pick gets injured. Like that's always tough, especially when it's a pitcher. And we know the history of injuries in the Tigers organization the past, 18 months or 2 years, really what it's been. So I can see where people are frustrated. But no, Jobe's legit. Like when you watch him pitch, you don't even have to be like a scout or somebody who really knows the game well to notice the movement on his pitches just kind of casually watching the game.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've noticed this year, comparatively speaking to last year, is the fact that he's throwing pitches with, you're talking absolutely right, the movement aspect of it, but it's the command in counts. Like he is not. Last year, you saw a lot of counts where he went to 3-2, and he got the benefit of the umpire. But this is like just swing and miss stuff that is just all over the board, or just swing and miss stuff. There's a streak where he didn't allow a walk, I believe, over the last 50 innings of work, and it's a command of the strike zone that I haven't seen from a Tigers pitching prospect. As much as if I think about this from a casual standpoint, of a fan standpoint, watching the minor leagues since it started really, I've been following the minor leagues all my life, but I've never, in doing this for the last 5-6 years, I've never seen a prospect just go. Especially his first debut in AA. You put him out there for whatever reason, you don't put him on the playoff roster, but you put him on the Arizona Fall League roster. It worked out for the Seawolves in the end, but he went out there against a team like Richmond, and Richmond's no slouch. He got 11 swings and misses, and it's fast. When you're getting strikes or you're getting swings and misses with the fastball in the zone, that's impressive to me. That makes you stand out above everybody else.
And one thing that I noticed with, when you watch these prospects, a lot of times, if you actually watch the games, you'll see some prospects put up 8, 9, 10 strikeouts. But when you watch it, they're falling down 3-1 or they get to 3-2 and they just have a good enough fastball that they can just throw that high. And a lot of these minor league hitters aren't advanced enough to foul that off, and they chase pitches out of the zone. Like, I'm in a jam here. Let me just go fastball twice here and get out of this. Jobe doesn't have to rely on that. And that is what you're seeing in development of a pitcher, of knowing how to use his pitches and being confident and efficient enough with each pitch that he doesn't have to just rely on a fastball to get him out of tough counts.
Yeah, and that's where even you talk about this yesterday. Here he is, he goes into the Arizona Fall League, getting the extra innings to kind of pad up the fact that he missed quite a bit due to injuries, but he's going out there and along with Wilmer Flores actually had a really strong outing, which was Wilmer Flores in 1 inning less work had more swings and misses than Jobe did. But Jobe, in terms of, and I know like the comparison to Marcel Meyer, who struggled mightily at AA, and the Eastern League is no joke. We saw, on the other hand, Jace Young adjust well in AA. That I don't know what's going to. I think Meyer is still a good prospect for Boston, but I'm not going to also. Again, I don't know why we're doing this comp thing when, like I said, 6 months ago, Tiger fans were like, "Could have had a shortstop. But then here comes Kevin McGonigal, and people maybe forget about that already. I don't know.
Well, and it's with Meyer. A lot of people were on board on draft night. To be fair, they wanted Meyer, so and that is stuck. And Jobe, with the injury, people were worried. But then now, and I wish no ill will on anybody. I hope Marcelo Meyer is an all-star. But I was worried to see that he got a shoulder injury. Those, to me, are always scary as something that can linger. Because I think that's why he missed the last few weeks, right? Was a bum shoulder.
Correct. Yep. That was the case. And so it could be something that does linger. Yeah. But let's get into the Major League team. And So let's start off with some of the things that you hope to address in free agency. And so let's start with the starting pitching. And are you? I think you're in the same camp as us that you don't see Erod coming back. And so
No.
this is where it gets interesting as far as addressing through the free agency or through within. You saw some sort of Gibson Long, and Uper and I've talked about this. Uper still needs to see more to believe it. Reese Olson, again, he surprised all of us, but he looked really good. You always have to worry about that second season. It's always like it's more with hitters, but still with pitching, you still have to consider that. So you said a need to get a veteran a 1-year deal. Is this because you think based off the depth they have right now with Madden on the way, Montero, and Hurler, who had a really good, strong second half to the season at Neary?
Yeah. So my whole thought process here is, first off, the article is trying to be extremely, realistic. It's not trying to say, here's what I want. It's me trying to predict the offseason for them. So there's one thing that a lot of fans forget is you have to have a match. You have to have the player say, yeah, I want to go to Detroit and pitch there, right?
Yeah.
And I would be all for a multi-year deal. It just seems less likely. A lot of players are going to take an opportunity to bounce back. We see this across the league at every position. The Tigers have some prospects on the way, some that will get spots in the rotation as early as some point next summer. However, Tarek Skubal, I think, ace type material, great. After that, in my opinion, there's a drop off for the 2024 season from there. I like Matt Manning. I think he's perfectly fine rotation piece. I think he's a 4 or 5 type on a good team, not a 2 or 3 type. And, Reese Olson showed a lot more than I think anyone was expecting of him. But I'm still not like, yep, he's a top 3 in a rotation. Let's just move on. Like, I'm not that comfortable yet. And I rarely will be with a rookie after their first season. There's few. He wasn't, top 50 prospect in all of baseball type that has that pedigree to back it up. So in my eyes, it's okay. You can replace the Erod money to give to a vet to come in on a 1-year deal. 1-year deals are not bad. There's no such thing as a bad 1-year deal. None. If it doesn't work well, who cares? It's 1 year. You can cut them. You're eating the money either way. So a name that I just kept coming across that seemed realistic, that has a higher ceiling than a lot of 1-year deals, is Frankie Montas. Now, I don't think Frankie Montas is some incredible pitcher. I thought in Oakland, his stats were padded, especially if you look at the home and away splits. However, coming into Detroit, a place that can help him, I see that as an attraction for him. He needs a bounce back. He was injured all year. The Yankee stint went horribly wrong for him. Hey, come in here, provide some vet leadership, get your innings in a nice pitcher ballpark with one of the best pitching coaches. It makes sense for both parties, is why I kind of landed on him. And you can give him a good chunk of change. Like, if you really wanted to, you could give him, you have the Matt Boyd money coming off. You have the Erod money coming off. Like, there's money coming off the books, and there's plenty of opportunity to say, let's make this attractive for you. Now, you can also apply that and say, let's give a multi-year deal to somebody. I just don't think the Tigers are in a position right now with a new GM, all the transition they've had over the past 12 months to say, all right, here's another multi-year deal. Those haven't exactly gone right for them in the past couple of years. There's no need to rush this. I think Jobe could potentially see spots in the rotation. I mentioned some other prospects on there like Madden and Montero who could get some opportunities. Flores, as you mentioned, is an option that I actually forgot to list on the article, but for sure an option. Like, there's other players who could factor in. I don't think it's necessary to go out and sign the 3-4 year starting pitcher, especially because those are pretty risky deals typically.
And you look at, and I'm glad that you bring up, because you and I, and we've talked about this in Uper, we're all in the realm of realistic thinking when it comes to this team. Mm-hmm. And Scott Harris mentioned that at the end of the season presser, when he spoke to us, that they're going to add quote unquote complementary players. So as far as Ty Madden goes, I still think he needs a little time. down in either AAA or AA. I think he's going to probably end up starting the season in Toledo, but who knows how the Tigers are going to structure it this way, because he still has to get left-handers out on a regular basis. And his numbers in the second half of the season are great, but you have to kind of make that adjustment, and you want to make sure his walks are down a little bit. Wilmer Flores, at this point, if they could use him possibly out of the bullpen, he's been throwing his changeup quite a bit, not for swings and misses, mind you, but he's been using it as an effective pitch. But it's really, you're right, asking Sawyer Gibson-Long and Reese Olson to come back and do what they did, that would be great. As far as Matt Manning goes, this is the $1 million thing is, and I'll go to you first. It seems like people want to have Matt Manning used more of as a trade piece than an actual part of this rotation.
Yeah, and I've heard that too, and I don't quite see it. I just don't know what other team in the league is going to look at the fact that for 3 years now he's averaged like 14, less than 14 and a half starts per year. I mean, that's the reliability factor of Matt Manning. I like Matt Manning. I think he's a competitive pitcher. I hope he can find a way to stay healthy and get 28, 30 starts in some season, and we really see what the Tigers have with him. But in terms of an attractive trade piece, you would have to have a team that's really looking to speculate based on the unknown. With the only actual known is that he's been averaging 14 starts a year, and that's what you're getting.
Yeah, I don't think that you would get a fair return for Matt Manning. And if Tigers fans are saying we want to be competitive in the next couple of years, like having a guy who can at least be a rotation piece is good. I know people are excited about the prospects, and they should be, but it's one of those deals you just need to pump the brakes and kind of see, they'll get their starts. You need more than 5 pitchers. You're going to need 8, 9, 10 starting pitchers this year. Some of those guys will get an opportunity. You may see somebody like somebody take a step like Reese Olson did. You may see somebody who comes up and it just doesn't work out. You don't want to get in a position, if you want to be competitive in the next couple of years, where you're just trading away a Matt Manning because of the idea of these other prospects. And it's just to keep in mind, these are not top 100 prospects. I know Jobe is, but the other guys, like, these aren't surefire, like super high up. And I like them. I'm high on them. I don't want that to come off wrong, but we're not dealing in a world where there's this huge surplus of really high level prospects, and we can start trading away guys who have gotten outs at the major league.
No, you're absolutely right. And I make sure that, like, for example, even with Casey Mize, mentally speaking, like there's talks about him during his rehab. There's not a for sure thing either. It's not.
Can't count on him.
You can't count on him. You're right. And even when I look at the depth, which was this year is a lot more heading into the next year, the depth in terms of where they're going to get from the farm system is a lot better. But a guy like another guy who I like, because they seem like the tackle former players who go to the Giants for whatever reason, Sean Manaea, who's coming off a pretty good season. He's got a FIP of 3.90, and he had a pretty healthy K per 9 of 9.79. That's a guy who, if you want, again, he's a little wildly inconsistent, but a 1-year, 2-year deal, fine tune him with the, not just, again, more than just Chris Fetter, because everybody talks about the Fetter experience. And we always talk about that, but Juan Nieves, the entire development staff. And the reason why I like him, because there's his second best pitch is a changeup. And the Tigers did a really good work in terms of getting guys the most out of their certain pitches. And I think batters only hit 203 this year against it, or 208 against it. And that's a good pitch that sets up his fastball. So he also throws a sweeper. I feel like this is a good match for the Tigers here.
Yeah, the Manaea is interesting because I did not really like him much. And this past year, they started using him in an interesting way where he started some, and then he would come out of the bullpen after an opener and kind of play like a bulk role of innings. And that's when he was really successful. And I don't hate that process. I know a lot of people don't like the idea of that. It scares them and whatnot. But some of these piggyback situations, and we saw it in Detroit this year, can work against certain lineups. It's not the worst idea. I like that option. And when you look at the free agent class, I mean, let's just be real. It's pretty bad. Starting pitcher, though, there's some options that are at least like attractive. Some guys with some track record. So it's like if you're going to spend money in free agency, maybe you go after one of the starting pitchers. If you're only let's just assume they're not going to be signing multiple big contracts. If you're just going to spend one, I like the idea of getting a starting pitcher to add some vets to this this rotation.
Well, it's Andrew Friedman, right, in LA. Didn't he say once in a while you got to get a little irrational in free agency?
Yeah,
you know. So to get the guy you want, not finish third every time when you're bidding on these players. So they just have such a low payroll. I could see one splurge, you know, and it all comes down to even going beyond Scott Harris to Chris Ilitch and where the word comes from him. How involved does he want to get in terms of being aggressive or not?
I'm sorry, he's a free agent next year, so he has 1 year left with the Giants. My apologies.
And if you want to do a multi-year deal with some little bit of risk and high return, Luis Severino from the Yankees did not have a good year this year, dealt with injuries and whatnot. But look at his numbers and watch him pitch from the previous years. I think he's only 27, 28 years old, somewhere around there. You could give that guy 3 years, 12 to 15 million a year if you wanted to, and kind of roll the dice on somebody who's had a good track record and would want to probably leave New York. You know, I'm assuming they're moving on from him. That's a high upside, but you may have to give him the extra year because he's going to have other bidders. If most teams are saying 2, you may have to give him 3 type of a deal.
So, by the way, I actually was right. So he can opt out after the season. So he has an opt out for the season. So there's a possibility that he hits the market. He's from Indiana, which is not too far from Michigan. I don't know what his ties are with the Midwest, but just something to consider. But another name that I like too, in terms of like just giving that 1 year deal, and you kind of have to see, you have to kind of, the thing is though, is like arms with like Corey Kluber that have all those miles on it. No, I don't. I think that's kind of a bad idea. Even Jake Orissi, who I've liked before, same thing. It's like it's kind of like he's injured a lot. You have to wonder what they would get with that. Tyler mentioned in the chat, Michael Wacha. That's another name I do like. But I also see the Tigers for whatever reason, and I don't know why I think this, but I feel like they would try to see what they had and kick around the tires in a guy like Luke Weaver, because
I would not suggest doing that. As somebody who watched probably 20 Luke Weaver starts last year, really, really interesting pitcher. He is miserable in the first inning, pretty decent after that. I just don't think he has it. Like, I watched a lot of Luke Weaver last year, and it made me pull my hair out. So I'm hoping not to do that again this year.
I hope they don't either, but I feel like that's don't you feel like that's a Tiger thing to like take a guy like Luke Weaver?
Luke Weaverish guys, yeah.
Because again,
slightly better than Kyle Hendricks, but in that range, you know.
What was that, Clay?
How about Kyle Hendricks?
You know what? That's not a bad idea. It's not bad an idea either. I just
I saw Kyle Hendricks pitch twice here in Des Moines on his rehabs against the Mud Hens. Whatever reason, I saw a lot of his starts with Chicago this year. Every time I saw them on TV, he was pitching. The guy throws 87, 88, but he keeps his team in the game. He has a knack for it. You know, he throws strikes and he gets guys out.
You can't really argue the results. It's just what I'm worried about is the Tigers taking a waiver or somebody like Jacob Junis and just, again, trying to see what they can get out of that, like turn blood out of a stone. And Michael Lorenz, too, somebody mentioned in the chat. Yeah, I'd be fine with that, too. So let's move on to next. You address the bullpen. You said the need to keep trusting Chris Fetter in the organization. I agree with you on this. Now, you correct me if I'm wrong. You said that you wanted to have like possibly a bullpen or like a free agent signing for the bullpen, correct?
I don't think I did.
Oh, okay.
Maybe that was John.
Maybe it was John. Maybe it was John that said that.
Maybe it was John. I'm firm. You know, always been a firm believer in using spare parts from all over the place, flood the zone with arms, and should be able to find a bullpen. Look for the right skills, guys who throw strikes, guys who throw hard, or hope you run into the next Tyler Holton. I would sign as many guys as I could get into my camp and let the coaches sort it out. And also maybe a couple of those starters in the minors end up being relievers anyway. Maybe Alex Faedo takes that step, really becomes a good reliever.
Yeah, to me, it's as simple as, unless you're a true playoff contender, I'm not like adding big money to the bullpen.
Yeah.
Too oftentimes that's a fickle position, and there's so many ups and downs. The Tigers have proved that they're able to. They kind of have the market cornered here. Like, they've turned starters into relievers at a good success rate. They've been good at it without having to spend a ton of money doing it. In a year like this year, I would say just kind of play the waiver wire, sign a few free agent, lower level guys. You could come up with a list of 200 of those type players and invite to spring training. I don't see like the $8 million a year option coming in this year in the bullpen. And like, you could have these starters in the minors move. Like, there's just no reason in my eyes to see that as like a priority. There's going to be fillers coming in, and from everything we've seen recently, like, that looks to be okay. They've proved that they are able to do well in that scenario.
And look, when you have a guy like Tyler Matson in your bullpen, which Erie did have, him and Blake Holub, those two guys. And what's interesting is I believe it's Matson went to the same school or is friends with James Karniak, another over-the-top reliever like that. Him and Blake Holub were unhittable in Erie. And those two guys don't get a lot of prospect love because, again, it's relievers, and I understand the indication on it. But when you have a K per 9 of 12.42 and you're rocking a FIP of 2.14 in the Eastern League, you're doing pretty damn good. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, he in the playoffs, he was dominant. Along with Blake Holub, you also have Andrew Magno, who throws two different curveballs that comes out from the left-hand side. But honestly, the Tigers, I think, bullpen-wise, just some of the prospect-wise, are fine. Right now, we're seeing Tanner Colheap kind of get lit up right now. He's just coming back from injury in Arizona Fall League. But you're right. A guy I can see coming out of the bullpen now, possibly, as much as he pitched out of the bullpen yesterday, Wilmer Flores. Because Flores still needs a third pitch. And while the changeup is still there, it's not developing like it should. And again, I think that's a guy you can consider. But Matson, Blake Holub, those are two arms worth mentioning that also could be in the bullpen next year.
Look around the league, no matter what. Just watch the playoffs. There's going to be bullpen guys you've never heard of. Guys who were in AA last year that take that jump up. There's always those stories. That's why I don't worry too much about it when the team's in a situation kind of like the Tigers are, like where they are in their team life cycle.
You're so right, Clay. I mean, the Diamondbacks last week in the wild card series, they trot out some guy. I follow the Diamondbacks because of my family's out there. Some Andrew Sulfrank or something like that.
Yeah, you
never heard of him. I had no clue. He's pitching high leverage in the 8th inning in a big ass spot.
This guy was in a AA Amarillo to start the year.
Yeah,
and he just pitched 10 innings. That's all he has to his credit. Because I was expecting, to be honest, I haven't really been paying attention to Arizona since they fell apart a little bit. I was wondering what happened to Andrew Chafin because that was the guy they signed to do that, and I'm not sure if he got injured or what have you, but and also here's another guy too this happened last night too. Another guy who just came out of nowhere. I'm trying to think of the right-hander they had last night. I think it's Ryan Thompson. Was it the guy who pitched last night? I think.
Yeah, he pitched last night.
Yeah, Ryan Thompson, a guy who was a 23rd round draft pick out of Houston, and
he was Miami or something at one point.
He was with Tampa. He was with Tampa for 3 years.
Tampa, yeah.
Yeah. And he just, Tampa just, throws guys out to the wind. And in 13 innings of work, since he got called up, he's posted an ERA of 0.69. And, you're right. You don't have to kind of worry about that. This is a guy who worked his way back up. I think he spent some time injured, but still, nevertheless, he was in Durham, just he put up some decent numbers in AAA Durham too this year. Take a flyer on him. Look at him. He's pitching in a high leverage situation. You're right, and especially with the way the Tigers have developed pitching, I'm not worried about that at all. So
I'm actually more wondering if they trade someone like Foley, if there's any kind of market. There was a market for Joe Jimenez. So is there a market for a Jason Foley somewhere out there?
Or
there would be a good market for Foley, I think.
Yeah. Or they even can trade Lang if they're not emotionally like I've noticed. There's one thing about Sky Harris, he's going to look at the numbers, and if he can get something else better out of and bring somebody else of his own caliber that he wants to bring in, he's going to do that. So let's move on to the infield, and so third baseman, definitely, you're absolutely right. I don't trust Cole Keith there. I mean, long term, he's going to be probably perhaps second baseman, even in the outfield at some point. The Jace Young experiment starts at the Arizona Fall League, but it's going to need some time. I still think he's better suited on the right side of the field, but it's just me. But yeah, what you said about Leonard, Eddie's Leonard, Nick Maton, Short, Lipsius, and Perez, it's kind of you're right. It is an overwhelming group, but this is a team too that doesn't right now. When I was doing the third baseman write-ups for Tiger Minor League Report, I'm looking it over and I was just like, well, shoot, like no guys were set in set positions. Like Isaac Pacheco was pretty much about it. Everybody else was like a hodgepodge at third base. Ironically enough, Justin Herman-Malloy wins the All-Star Award at third base, and then he wins it in right field for second team right field, but Harris said he was going to play some more time in the outfield when we talked to him in August, but then he was playing third again. So you know what? This is the position I think out of all of them the most that has so many question marks.
Yeah, and the way I saw it was Cold Keith's not a third baseman. That's just kind of what I've seen from what I've watched, from the stuff that I've listened from you all, and I think he ends up somewhere besides third. I think it starts with him at second is the first position that he's going to play. Then you talk about Jace Young. Where's he going to play? The Tigers have a lot of how do we get this guy in the lineup? Oh yeah, by the way, he's not good defensively anywhere. Okay, this is, there's only one DH. So it's going to get interesting. So the way I saw it was, if you want to try Cold Keith at third, just to get him in the lineup at some point, whatever, that's fine. You have the options that you just went through and that we've listed. We all know the players from last year's kind of bench options as well can play second or third for the most part. A lot of those guys can. So the way I see it is, okay, Keith at second. I don't think Ibanez comes back. If you want to bring him back, that's fine. I just think that they would rather go with one of these younger guys, not use a 40-man spot for a 30-year-old who really for the first time in his career got, a bigger chunk of at-bats. I think he's fine. And maybe he says, I want to go to a different team. And I don't know what he wants to do. But if you're giving almost 400 at-bats to Ibanez again in 2024, I don't think that that's a good situation to be in. I think younger players or a free agent should take those at-bats. So I mentioned a Gio Urshela as just a, usable guy who could come in and play the position. Somebody like that, there's not a ton in free agency right now. I'm looking at the list, and a lot of these guys I just don't see as a fit. I don't think it makes sense for both sides. So the way that my brain works is, all right, next step, non-tender candidates. And I think that's where we may have to just wait around and see who gets non-tendered. And sometimes guys like Jamer Candelario, right? He was non-tendered, ended up in a similar position. Hey, just come start at third for a year and look how that turned out for him. So I'm not super worried. This could also be a place if you wanted to do a trade. I just don't think that the Tigers are in a position to be going out there and slinging around trades with their GM's been on the job for 2 months and he's still trying to evaluate. But there are options here. There's a lot of utility type guys who I see as bench bats. Several players that I just don't think will even cut it long term to be on a major league roster, but org depth's totally fine there. But the good thing is you have options. The bad thing is none of them have a truly high ceiling.
It is just all the years we've been doing this and watching this. It's nice the Tigers have a fair amount of bats to choose from coming up, but it's so unsettled where they're going to play. My rule of thumb has always been this: if you can hit, they will find a spot for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it really, I think some of it may just even come down to what they see in the spring. Who gets off to a hot start? Looks like their bat is ready to play, and maybe they walk into a gig, early in the season, just by going with who's hot. Unless they do trade from this stockpile of guys who are either first baseman, second baseman, or third baseman, nobody knows. Do they deal one for a piece that they know they can plug somewhere? I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah. I think a guy like Perez, we saw bounce around in multiple positions last year. I think that he brings, some intrigue with bat to ball, and he's shown some pop and some speed. Like there's enough there that like I wouldn't be upset with that guy getting a chance out of spring to be a bench role. Lipsius, like I think we're just seeing reruns of kind of like a Zach Short or players who, he's fine on a rebuilding team, but if you want to take that step to 2024 being kind of the intro to a competitive window starting in 2025, then you need to start finding better depth or filtering out the ones like the Zach Shorts and Zach McKinstry's, who we all like. They're all fine. There's a reason why they're not on better teams.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Thank you, by the way, Bud Red, for the $5.
Off the Frickers building.
Exquisite.
But yeah, there's even, if you look at some depth charts across the league, I'm sure there is some sort of log jam the Tigers are probably looking at right now. And the biggest thing that it's going to be position versatility. Harris loves that. It was apparently it was clear with the McKinstry signing trade, or it was trade. Yeah, that's right. Trade.
Right.
The Eddie's Leonard pickup too. That was, again, this is a guy who made his debut in AAA, had a pretty good year in terms of even advanced metrics, did above the league average in the international league in hard hit contact and ISO numbers, had a pretty good debut. But again, is he going to be a center fielder? Is he going to be a shortstop? Who knows? As far as what they're going to work on Baez. If Baez does come back, which it looks like he will, Tigers are not going to lose patience with him. As much as fans are going, rubble. It defensively, unless they can come up with a better option at short, honestly.
And the reason why I didn't even address him in the articles, because I just don't see how it's possible that anything happens there right now. I think 2024 is the year where we start talking at the end of it about him just getting cut. Like, I don't think that that's impossible. New GM in, you'll have some players advancing. But like, if you cut him today, you have to sign someone to fill him in, like to fill that spot. There's not like a guy pushing. It's not like if Colt Keith was a shortstop and that was the only spot you had third base and second base covered, like that's a different conversation. There's not a great, ready to go, more of a sure thing type player at short right now.
Yeah. There's no way they're giving Ryan Kreidler's not getting 130 games at shortstop.
No.
For the Detroit Tigers,
I mean, if you're looking at a team, like if you're in a situation with the Tigers right now, you have a lot of 4A guys. Let's be honest here. And they're going to have to make some decisions because some of those 4A guys are not going to have roster spots because they have to make room for Kyler Montero. There's a couple other guys who are on that that are Rule 5 eligible that a team would love to have. Imagine I could totally see somebody snatching Montero in a heartbeat. If he was out there.
Oh yeah.
Just
and that's the thing about the Rule 5 that sometimes we get a little scared of as fans is, we all overrate our own prospects.
Right.
And then they get selected. We think, oh my gosh, oh no. And like a lot of times they get returned at some point. Like it's not the end of the world, but like we're talking about a team that has spots on the 40-man that they can easily trim, in my opinion. And last time I was on the show, we were talking about a similar situation of Cody Clemens. I said, you just got to improve from like the Cody Clemens of the world. Like the Tigers need to take a step to a different level where we aren't getting excited about Ibanez or Cody Clemens or those kind of, fringe guys. Like this is step one in 2024 of figuring out those depth options. Lipsius, is he a guy or not? Signing somebody, as I like to say, an adult in the room. You need an adult in the room that's not Javi Baez in this infield. We didn't touch on catchers, but I think Jake Rogers is obviously the catcher there. In terms of backup, Carson Kelly, I think he's at $3.5 million next year if the option's taken. I don't know, like that's kind of the going rate for a lot of backup catchers. He hasn't hit very well. He's already in the org. They got him for a reason. I don't think they just got him to just ride it out and see what happens. Maybe they did. Either way, like I'm not that worried about the backup catcher, to be honest with you. It'll be like every other team. At some point, there'll be some guy who you've heard of who's been a backup forever, and he'll just be wearing a Tigers jersey on the bench.
Yeah, I don't really think they should use the money as a reason to get rid of Carson Kelly. I actually thought he looked good behind the plate. I don't.
Yeah.
I'm just a lowly amateur high school umpire, but I am behind the plate with a lot of people, and there are times he really moved quickly back there. He made a couple wonderful plays, snatching a ball that before it could go foul to create a double play for some big outs. He looked the part defensively, and I think from a backup catcher, if you got a backup catcher that can hit the occasional home run, like he had 19 one year, and plays excellent defense, that's your guy.
Yeah. So he's been dealing with injuries. If he could maybe just get a healthy offseason, and that's the type of guy that, like, if midseason Dylan Dingler needs to be called up or, whatever, like moving on from Carson Kelly isn't a big deal. You know what I mean? Even if you pay him 6 round, like no one's going to be upset. It's not like you went out and signed a 3-year deal for some backup catcher and, oh man, now we got to release him. Like if you move on from Carson Kelly during the year, it's just a transaction page, and that's about all the thought you put into it.
Yeah. And really, the Tigers are also high on Eliezer Alfonso, who had a pretty good, strong finish to his season in Erie. So the organization's strong on him. He is also Rule 5 eligible. One guy that I didn't mention as a trade possibility for a team that right now, as we speak, is facing elimination is the Baltimore Orioles. And a guy by the name of Joey Ortiz, who can play short, play second and third. And the best part about all this, ladies and gentlemen, is he bats right-handed. Tigers need a couple more right-handed bats. This is a guy who's been proven to hit. I mean, in a small sample size, he didn't hit in Baltimore, but
yeah,
hey,
he's great.
That's a name. Like, look, if I'm the Tigers and I'm going to go to Baltimore and say, hey, look, what do you want? Who do you want for Ortiz? Because they have pitching prospects. Baltimore has some, but their infield is. I mean, if you look at their starting infield for next year, you're going to have Jordan Westberg there. You're going to have Gunnar Henderson at short. You have your pretty much set. What is Ortiz going to do? I mean, he's kind of stuck right now.
Yeah. I mean, they have so many prospects coming up that play infield. It's crazy. They're definitely going to make a trade. I think that I like that target. It's just, I wonder if they say we want a high level pitcher and you have Tarek Skubal and that's it. And I'm not wanting to trade Tarek Skubal. And the reason why I say that is not to shut down anything you said. It's just there's going to be teams out there that are going to be like, okay, you want Shane Bieber, you want that was just the first name to come to mind, but high end 1-2 type pitcher, you'll have a huge package you can give us. I think the Tigers just aren't going to trade Skubal right now, and that's the only pitcher I see meeting. Now maybe there's another trade that's a different level trade.
Yeah, I would be surprised if they move Skubal. I've often been in the camp though. I'd be open to the idea. I don't say no until you tell me what you want to give up for him. Right? There's a price. Everybody has a price. We know that. With Baltimore, they have an owner who has been publicly a cheapskate. Right? I mean, he's pretty much predicted his own cheapness that's coming down the pike here. That he's going to be cheap in a couple of years when all these guys need to be resigned. So. They're not going to go out and sign Aaron Nola, right? I wouldn't bet on that. So, would they really want to pursue a Tarek Skubal and come at the Tigers with an Ortiz and a Colton Cowser and a Connor Norby and, a lot of guys that they could probably afford to give up? That's the trade you at least have to dissect because let's face it, Skubal looked wonderful, but I mean, he's got an injury sheet that's, fairly substantial.
Yeah, I like that. I see a comment about trading for Ryan McMahon from Colorado, and
Yeah.
I like him as a player. I don't like that contract. He's making like, I want to say like 12 or 15 for like several years. And anytime we operate trade scenarios with Colorado, you throw it all up because they do the strangest things as organizations. Extensions, trades, everything is so weird. Never do trade, proposals with them on Twitter or whatnot, because you never know what that organization is gonna do.
I will never understand how the Rockies work, and especially when you look at the pitching
Terrible.
development, and they're like, what was it, 3 or 4 arms down to Tommy John Surge at the same time. I'm good. No, I'm good. They have some veteran starters you could look at, but again, I don't think the Tigers are going to risk that. But
And they're all signed long term for like good money. Like Antonio Cincinnati signed for like 4 more years at $10 million a year. Like
that,
he has like a 5 ERA, by the way.
I want to understand. I want to understand the logic of that. When I saw that happening, I'm like,
so the Rockies just say, if we can get anyone that can have under a 5 ERA in Coors, we need to lock them up, because you cannot sign a free agent pitcher at Coors. So anytime they have any level of success, they just lock them up, cross their fingers, and hope that they can get better, or that they can sign enough bats to win games 8-5, 8-6. It's a weird strategy. Beautiful ballpark, miserable to run a team in there, though.
yeah, it's I don't get it, man. I really don't. And but for the Tigers to, I think if we're going to talk about Baltimore before we move on, I think you would have to listen to what, or consider that, because if Tarek Skubal is not, like, I'm almost in the point where I'm like, okay, I would like the Tigers to keep Tarek Skubal because he gives them a viable option for next year. However, if Baltimore is like, look, we're going to give you Ortiz, we're going to give you a guy like, they're looking at some of their, like, somebody that's in the Arizona Fall League right now. We're going to give you Connor Pavloni, the catcher.
Oh, yeah.
In Double-A. We might even give you a guy like, I don't know, John Rhodes or Billy Cook, guys who are in the Arizona Fall League. They might be in the Arizona Fall League for a reason.
Yeah.
Just saying, like, you put them on this, again, not saying that they might put them on, or they might be using it for developmental purposes, but there's also an ulterior motive to this too. Don't you think? I mean, like, maybe put these guys who are like, hey, if you like them.
Yeah, no, that happens. Skubal, man, it's just going to be tough. When you're a new GM, it's really tough to make a move like that, just in terms of perception from the fan base, in my opinion. Like, I'm just trying to think of a human. I'm coming into a new job and trading my best asset probably, like, right off the bat. I just don't see that happening this year. They could get a haul for him, though. 3 more years of control entering ARB next year. A team like Baltimore, like, I mean, that makes sense. They're going to be able to get a good pitcher relatively, cheap.
Yeah.
It's the biggest thing for me as we move forward here, as we get through the playoffs and all that good stuff. This offseason should have, I don't want to quite say fireworks, but close to it, right? This should not be the dead zone that we saw last winter. I think they have some pieces that can be moved and probably should be moved. And they're at least within sight of contending in the Central Division, right? They have a shot if things go right and they can build the right lineup. I don't think we'll be bored this year.
And I hate to sound negative. The only thing I see is this free agent class being relatively poor. I would hate to see the team go out, sign 3-year deals because they want to make the fans happy and whatnot, especially when you look at next year's free agent class and say, oh, man, we wasted all of our money this offseason. We could have had Alex Bregman next offseason, or I mean, there's still some decent names. Max Muncy, there's, in my opinion, a better offseason next year. So, like, if I'm the Tigers, I say sign the 1-year deals unless it makes sense for a multi-year deal. But I would hate to have money locked up in kind of risky profiles like Michael Conforto. Like maybe he bounces back, maybe he doesn't. Like we don't really know. And then when next year comes around, it's, well, last year we spent that. And I know it sucks as a fan to say, oh yeah, well, wait till next offseason. Like, Tigers fans have been saying that forever, right? So I'm just looking at the free agent class, and there's going to be some teams that do it. They're going to overpay for players who are pretty mediocre. And I know in the article I wrote, I mentioned like a Mark Hanna, 1-year deal for a vet, good serviceable player.
Mm-hmm.
That's a deal that like I think would improve the team with still having financial flexibility for the long term.
The thing is that, and JP joined on the chat saying, I'm not saying it's a bad idea of guys and being realistic, but that's what players get. Step back to 60 wins if you're going to go from Erod to these guys and depending on a non-realistic core. The thing is, based off being what Scott Harris said at the end of the year presser when he was asked about spending money on free agents, it was clear what he said. I mean, the audio, I have the audio from the interview here, or when he was talking to the press about it. It's like, hold your horses, pretty much, essentially. Just because all this money's coming off they're going for complimentary players, or they're pulling the Dombrowski, and they're going to spend like crazy. I don't see that happening because look at the way they use the waiver wire. What they're going to do, because they have already guys in mind already. JP, look, I'd love for them to I like the Tigers to get bold and do something and make a trade like Tigers haven't traded their own prospects for a player to be ready that's actually worked out. I mean, the Avila era was riddled with crap that didn't work out. So I think there's got to be a mixture of them looking at guys who they believe fit their profile and they've already targeted and they already have in mind, and they should make a trade for guys who are about ready to bust out. Yeah, Deadly Ninja Bees, I agree with you. Tiger fans are tired of losing. Sky Harris is not.
That's a great comment, actually.
It's a great comment.
That's a really great comment. I love that.
It's fantastic because he's right.
Yes.
Look, even as as a person covering the team the last decade, I'm sorry. When the winning was good, it didn't matter.
Yeah.
But I'm sick of the losing. I mean, I'm sick of this is when I'm talking about progress made in the farm system over the last 2 years, and people are saying I sound like a homer about it. Why do I sound like a homer when I have not seen any progress before that? It's really you're finally they're developing pitching. Finally, the Tigers are getting somewhat hitting prospects, but they still have a long way to go. On the hitting side of things.
Yeah.
From what Clay said, I agree with what both of you just said. What Clay said, the weak free agent market, not investing 3-4 years in a slightly better than average player, maybe not even that. I get that. I think, and Raj brought up Scott Harris, he pretty much threw a whole lot of cold water on the free agency market. So either that was the smoke screen or he meant it. I agree with Raj. I think he meant it. Yeah. When I say fireworks this year, I really think it will be the trade market. I think they can get some things done. And I think part of it comes from some of these players that they're trading. Yeah, he's worked with them for a year, but most of them are still Avila guys. I mean, this is still not Scott Harris's organization top to bottom in terms of where these players were produced. So he probably doesn't have as much loyalty to those Avila acquisitions, and they can be moved maybe in his mind. So we'll just have to see.
Yeah, I mean, basically Scott Harris is a cold shower to a hot, horny teenager looking for love, looking for lust, whatever you want to call it. That's what he's doing right now. As much as that analogy is dated, it's true. He is going to look for that's what he's going to do. It's again, I would like, Clay, as you being in Cincinnati Reds country right now, I think what we're going to see, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think with Detroit, I think I could see that happening with what they're getting from Cincinnati, which is guys who are coming up in their system and contributing and getting a couple pieces here and there.
I was thinking about that this afternoon. I was on a walk and I thought 2024 is kind of like 2023 like the Reds 2023 could be like the Tigers 2024. Now there's a little difference, the Reds had several top 100 prospects all make their debuts, but in terms of this is a team that we know looks better. They look competitive. You see it and you see the vision. And what did the Reds do? They're probably, hopefully, going to add this offseason in a bigger way. Last year, they brought in Will Myers. There's a vet, 1 year, $8 million. Like, okay, they brought in a few vets to surround a younger team, to fill out the roster, to raise the level of depth on the roster, which is what I've been talking about, is moving on from the 90 WRC plus guy that we like because, he had some moments, like moving on from that and increasing. Increasing overall to bump the roster up. So I think 2024 is still a year where it's not, go all in, let's make the playoffs. I think the record this year for the Tigers, and from what I saw, is they have a good core. They really do. I do think that they have a good core, and they have a good prospect core right behind it. The issue is they don't have, in my eyes, so many prospects that are close enough that I can say, trade this one, because we have enough that are going to work out. And they don't have so many prospects that have such high ceilings that I'm saying, don't worry about this position. Just that, player X, Y, and Z is going to fill it. I think Colt Keith's a player that I think can't miss in my eyes. After that, Jackson Jobe is another one that I don't think will miss. After that, I don't think there's a ton of can't miss. I don't think that Jace Young is. I think he had a good year last year. And when I watched him, there were times where he was awful. And there were times where he was great. And then every time I saw him run around the bases, I was kind of like, wait up. This guy looks too goofy to be a major leaguer, But he can run out his game. It just keeps coming back to this player's good, but defense, but strikeouts, but this. So I just don't see it as a team that's bulletproof enough to make some big splashes. That's why I think filling out the roster, and I know we still need to get to the outfield, so I'll wrap it up there.
Yeah, and the outfield is where there's a lot of questions more than answers, because Riley Green's coming back from an injury, so he's coming back from Tommy John. You have Kerry Carpenter, who wasn't bad in right field, but struggled down the stretch, but still had a good year. Let's not dispute that.
Oh, yeah.
Parker Meadows had a strong finish to his call up. Matt Burling is kind of a mystery to a lot of Tiger fans are frustrated. I think Tiger fans either really like him or they don't like him. There's no in between. Austin Meadows, I think he's not a long-term Tiger. I don't think he's here next year. And then in the minors, you have Justice Bigbie, who, by the way, put up the best batting average of any Tiger since 2006. And this guy was raking at Erie. He started hitting for above average in AAA. However, you have questions about Akil Baddoo, whether he's a fourth outfielder or not. If they stay and I like what Larry Love said. He said Harris is making this look like a 3-5 year rebuild. They overachieved this year with a weak roster. Look for a few less wins per year if they stand pat. I said this last night on Twitter, and Tyler's echoing it. A guy like Lourdes Gurriel, who's having a good. Toronto might come back and say, "Hey, we're bad, man. You want to come back?" I can see that happening too. But that's a perfect veteran bat. I like that idea a lot. He's coming off a 3-WAR season. Would be real. That would be if the Tigers got him. But because some of the guys are in beyond that, beyond Bigbie, the outfield, Trey Cruz, not there yet. They have a significant drop off, and I think this is where, at least in my opinion, not about you, but this is where the Tigers think they're going to spend the most.
Yeah, I was saying last year they need to move Veerling around more than just playing him in the outfield, because on a good Tigers team, if he's on the roster, it's in a utility role. and they started moving him around. And that's what I see him. If he sticks around, it has to be in a utility role. It cannot be as a starter on this team. I don't see Baду and Meadows on the same roster. I think that there's too much to duplicate there. Like, both limited ceilings, both have individual tools that are interesting, young, controllable, whatnot. But man, there just comes a point where we can't keep sitting around and waiting for Badu to fix X, Y, and Z. And I love Badu. He's so much fun. It has nothing to do with that. It's okay. Well, if Meadows is going to be on this roster next year, then I just don't see how Badu and him can both be out there. And then you have 4 lefty outfielders. And, the DH can be addressed. You can move guys around. But Justin Henry Malloy, I think, will get a chance. I don't know if that will be DH. I don't know if that will be left field. I do think Gurriel's a great fit. The issue I see is just what is his market going to look like? I think it could get – because everyone's thinking the same thing we are. It's like, oh, yeah, he's kind of a sleeper in all of this. Like, good player, established. Maybe people aren't really thinking about him. Man, like, I think he's going to get a pretty good deal. I would not be surprised if he got 3 years. I don't know. Over 10 a year.
Yeah, 3-4. I was saying 3 for 42 when you put 3 years out there. That's 14 a year.
Okay, yeah. Teoscar Hernandez is another, righty bat outfielder whose career has not been going well, but he's going to get paid too. A lot of times in free agency, you get paid for what you do in the past instead of what you do in the future. So a guy like that will get some money. I do think that this is a position where if you wanted to spend some, you could. I'm looking at the free agents now. Jorge Soler, I would stay away from Soler. We touched on Michael Conforto, like a name that I know no one would be jazzed about, like Adam Duvall. Like if he just came in for a year or two, like, well, he's a little bit older, but
a bat for hire.
Yeah. So it's a position that I see it as Riley Green, long-term Riley Green and Kerry Carpenter are fixtures. Then I see Justin Henry Malloy and Big B as, high chance major league players, not necessarily everyday starters, but high chance. So Meadows, Badu, you're going to upgrade from them maybe. This year in particular, there's going to be at-bats to go around.
Yeah, I think one of the things that really, Jackson Profar was the name that was mentioned. He ended up going to Colorado, and then he's terrible. Yeah, he's terrible. And then he ended up back in San Diego and at San Diego at the end of the season. There is a lot of names that are just kind of hard pass. Look at Jason, the name that I saw with the Dodgers, which I totally forgot about, was in the postseason. Was it Jason Hayward?
Yeah, he played really well.
Yeah, but then you saw him last night. He just I totally forgot that he was a thing. But yeah, they have to address it, and I think they have to. This is where you would get a player, either a player via trade or somebody that's like a 1 year, 2 year fix.
So yeah. What do you think about this? I just saw this name. So Anthony Santander from Baltimore, switch hitter, free agent after next year. So if the Tigers wanted to get involved with the trade with Baltimore, Santander, they have some outfielders coming up as well, just like the infielders. Santander, if you could get him, I know he's a good player for them, but I would not be surprised if they were willing to move on from him. And then you could get him in for a year and maybe sign him,
That's a player and a team where I could see a match for Matt Manning. That level of ball player, maybe with another little piece thrown in for the Tigers for Matt Manning would make some sense to me. A short deal for Santander. Because again, I just don't know what Matt Manning's market is. Who's going to really pursue him?
Yeah.
But a player like that would be interesting because he's a nice ball player.
I do like the idea of Brent Rooker from Oakland because that would be. Here's the thing. He's 28 years old. And Oakland, they've been Oakland's pretty much at this point like, who do you want? Okay, you want this for this person? Go. I mean, look at the returns they got from the Braves. I mean,
Yeah,
how much is
Oakland. No, Oakland is. There's just so much going wrong in Oakland. I like Rooker. I think the issue I see with him is he had a career year. He was awesome in college. Like I wouldn't hate that idea. But if he is available, like he's gonna have a market. To me, it's still like a lot of strikeouts. And you have to remember, like, he had 30 home runs, but I think 11 of those came in the first, 5 weeks of the season. Like, he got off to a ridiculous start, went a little bit colder than there. And I also write about the Athletics for Just Baseball. It's like, I watched way too much.
I'm sorry.
I watched way too much Oakland Athletics baseball. And it's like,
Again,
Brent Rooker's a good player.
Really sorry.
I like him a lot. I would probably just try to get somebody who's a little bit more well-rounded. He's terrible in the outfield, by the way. Absolutely miserable. He's a DH, so he fits in with the Tigers. Can't play defense.
Wenzel Perez strikes me as a guy who's an Oakland A waiting to happen. He gets 110 starts and hits 278 out of nowhere.
That's
nobody's ever heard of him.
You know what, Uper? That is a pretty good observation because that's a guy who can walk and can hit. So Oakland would covet that big time. I mean, Uper, that's so good. It's criminal.
They more or less just drafted fancy Perez in the first round this year when they got Wilson.
Yeah. Trading for a possum trap. Like I like that idea from old BK, trading for a possum or cash at this point, because I mean, the owner, John Fisher's suing the city of Las Vegas because they're using some of the money that was supposed to go to the stadium for schools. You scumbag. What is wrong with you, man?
We got plenty of schools, Raj.
What a lot of people don't know about him is he also owns the San Jose MLS team, and they're also like bottom of the payroll. So like this guy just has no interest in. I mean, he just sucks. Bottom line.
Wow. Is he on the Earthquakes, right? Is that what they are? The MLS team? Earthquakes?
I don't remember their names.
Yeah. Oh God. When Dan Dickerson on the road in the last month of when they went to Oakland, and you're calling out the Oakland A's as a broadcaster, look at those crowds too. I mean, there was more people at the in AAA and AA games here combined than there were crowds in Oakland.
It's so weird. I went to Oakland last year for a game, not the 2023 season, 2022, and it was in September. And man, it's sad.
Yeah.
I mean, you walk around the concourse, your feet stick to the ground. It smells. It's eerie because there's just all these concession stands and stuff just empty. No one working. Like the whole thing feels deserted, but the fans are incredible. And the only reason why is because the only fans at an Oakland A's game in September are the most diehard fans ever.
Yeah, hardcore.
So like everyone you talk to, everyone you see is so into it. They're awesome, but there's only 2,000 of them. It is really sad. I mean, it was depressing being there and just kind of walking through the motions of out in center field. They have like a luxury box thing up there that has just been like left for years without anyone touch. It's not in use anymore or anything. It's just bizarre. I'm ready for that thing to get torn down. It's sad.
The pictures inside of those suites are probably like the pictures of those shopping malls that have been closed for several years. They got all kinds of
Barry Zito's on the wall or something. Yeah.
You know what it reminds me of? It's probably like the same setup they have from the 89 championship team. You see the Mark McGuire, Dennis Eckersley still doing a badass pose or something.
I mean, they don't even try. There's a payphone that doesn't work in there still. They still have troughs in the bathrooms. And yes, I'm walking around and I'm like, I want to go to the team shop, pick up a hat or something. I get a hat at every stadium I go to. And I'm looking around there. There's like not really a team shop. And then you go into this like tiny room and it's just nothing. I mean, it is so sad how they treat the fans there. By far the worst I've been to, I think, 25 stadiums or something like that. By far the worst
Oh, it
one
has to be.
ever.
Yeah.
How do you
You know-
not want to sell merch?
I don't think that they want to hire employees. Like, there's 2 workers in there just kind of like standing at the cash register, and they don't have any selection, nothing. I mean, it's just pathetic.
When they go to Vegas, if they get there, which I won't believe it until they're there, but I think they need to go and get that new stadium. But what's going to be sad is, how those Vegas games roll. I mean, especially the first few years, it's going to be all visiting fans, right?
I mean, that's what it's probably
people
going to be.
Yeah,
Mostly.
people going to Vegas to see the Yankees, or going to Vegas to see the Texas Rangers if you're from
And
Dallas.
John Fisher being a scumbag, I promise this is the last Oakland story, but John Fisher said their projections were like 70% would be local fans at games.
Oh,
Okay, buddy.
What?
And then he comes back a month or 2 later and says, we want to try to do 4 p.m. games so that people can go to shows afterwards. Like, just knowing it's going to be all tourists. Like, you are lying right through your teeth.
wow.
Man, I mean,
That's
like,
hilarious.
You don't know anything. You don't know squat, you stupid idiot.
I mean, they're not even selling elephants in there. I mean, that's like, there's so many merch opportunities missed here, but 70%.
70% of people in Vegas at the A's games will be local.
You know what? Let's ask the Las Vegas Aviators, which is their AAA affiliate, ironically enough, how they're doing attendance wise. How are the attendance numbers? That's the thing. You have all this data available. You have the way you can grab money and grab data. Data is so key. And so last year, what's funny is the Oakland A's drew for in terms of affiliation wise, they led the PCL in attendance with a average of 6,910 fans. Okay, so that's not bad. It's Cashman. That's where they play. So that's where, and I expect that about the same when the Oakland A's come, because the Oakland A's attendance this year, in terms of where they stood as far as for 2023 numbers.
Gosh.
So they finished. Let's see here. All right. So it's funny. Their audience, their attendance actually grew from last year. 832,000 this year compared to 787 last year. Their attendance increased by 6%, but the average attendance was 9,129.
Do you know what people aren't realizing? If you watch a Aviators game, which I've watched plenty, that ball flies out of there just like Colorado. So you're getting a duplicate of the Colorado Rockies, only one that's not willing to pay mediocre players to stick around. So you're going to get bad players. Look up the ERA and the PCL for those teams. I mean, you're talking like a team ERA around 5.5 or 6.
Yeah, the PCL numbers.
It is. So imagine the Oakland A's, only all of their pitchers give up tons of home runs.
And before the American League and National League rules became the same, essentially, you look at PCL numbers. If somebody's batting 343, that's a mirage. That is just that's BS, because the way that leg is, and Deadly Ninja Beast points out this is true. The new attendance did probably help out Oakland because everybody got a chance to see. They got a chance to see.
Oakland ran a few, kind of campaigns, I guess, where there were fan-led giveaways because the team wasn't doing giveaways. So they gave away shirts and somehow came up with enough money to give away like 15,000 shirts. So they did a bunch of these fan things to get the fans. They did a reverse boycott. So they got all the fans to come in. When you're only talking 800,000, like a couple things like that can really boost it. You know what I mean? I think that they had, 30,000 fans, 25,000 fans for those games. And
yeah, it's then the podcast on such a negative note. That's fine by me, because I mean, honestly, it's just because I look at the Tigers sold out the last 2 games of the season with Miguel Farewell Tour. As far as how the attendance worked or in terms of, there's a couple things you can really point to. The Tigers did overachieve a little bit, but their attendance grew a little bit from last year. They're a fun team to watch, but there's still a lot of work to do. And Clay, I'm glad that you were able to point this out. You can find them at justbaseball.com. Do you have any episodes of your podcast or anything else you want to pimp? You will?
No, I'm not doing the fantasy baseball podcast anymore. That was a 1-year kind of fill in for me to do. Other than that, I'm going to be doing more off-season coverage over at justbaseball.com. You can follow me on Twitter. I'll be having all kinds of discussions, and my DMs are open there. So like, if you don't like tweeting out questions or discussions, you just want to talk Tigers at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, I'm always awake. So just shoot me a message. I'd be happy to chat.
Yeah, and I should mention our email more, because we do have a show email technically. But we'll be, so Larry wants to know if hope you guys will be staying on during the off season. Yes, we will. So tomorrow I'm recording, it's not streaming tomorrow, but I'm recording a special Tiger Minor League report as we announce the awards for Player of the Year, Pitcher of the Year, and what have you. And I'll have a special guest for that. But yes, we will still be continuing to record as news happens and what have you. I think we're going to probably take a break, probably towards the later part of November. Well, maybe before the holidays, honestly, before Thanksgiving, during that period of time where I don't think anything's going to happen. Because mentally, I will say this, I don't mind a break at this point. But again, I know, just take a couple of days off and we'll fine. But there's a lot of content, there's a lot of stuff to get to. So, but on the personal side, there's some things I have to take care of, and so that's where I'm at with that. But nevertheless, there'll still be continue to be stuff from us over at TigersMLReport.com and more. I mean, again, we hopefully, please think about donating to our PayPal or to our website. So if you go to TigersMLReport.com or you go to my Twitter handle, there's a PayPal link. All the money goes back to the site for gear, you name it. Went for road trips this year. So any donations go a long way.
So, Raj, are these awards a secret yet?
I could tell you offline.
Can you give us the initials?
I'm
kidding, Raj.
One's named after a horse. I mean, I think that's pretty clear. So, yeah, what I was doing, though, was I was trying to add up the numbers, but Justice Bigby has the best batting average of any Tiger in the last so there you go. But on that note, with the qualifier being with over 300 at 300 plate appearances, that's the big qualifier. So
nice.
On that note, Clay, thanks so much for joining us, man. Really
Thanks,
good talking, man. And it was long overdue. Congratulations on getting married, because I haven't seen you since you got married. So congratulations on that as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate you all having me on. Happy to come on anytime. It's always a good time.
Yeah, and hopefully this year in 2024 we'll actually get to meet up. I'm due down to go to Cincinnati. I've not been in Cincinnati yet, and that's
come on down.
Yeah, that'll be awesome. Take a road trip down there.
I live in Lexington, Kentucky, from Louisville, in Louisville all the time. If you ever go to a Bats game, let me know. We can work it all out.
Oh no, that sounds like a tour of Jack Daniels and the Bat Factory. Sounds like it's something in store. So yeah, follow him on Twitter. There's his handle right there, Clay_Snowden 2. And if you're listening at home, just rewind it and pause it, and then you'll get that from there. So myself, Uper, we'll talk to you next time. Have a great week, everybody.